For years already, in just about every Python class I teach, someone, sometimes many people, have asked me the question, are arguments in Python passed by value or by reference? So it's not a surprise that this question comes up often in interviews because it's something that many, many people are confused by. So let's start off with what this actually means and then how it's expressed in Python. So what it means is when I call a function, if I call myfunc with 10, or actually if I call myfunc with x, right, and x is 10, if I do this, are we passing a copy of 10 or are we passing the actual reference to x? That is, are we passing a copy of the value in x or are we passing the actual reference to x? And the reason we would care about this is, well, what happens if in the function they change our data? Will it be reflected outside of the function as well? So let's think about this in Python terms. So if I say here, indeed, x equals, let's say 100, 10 times better than my previous example. And I'm going to say def make 200 with y. And I say y equals 200. So now I'm going to call make 200 with x. So if Python's arguments are passed by value, then this will make no difference because we're assigning to y, but we're reassigning to the value. We're not actually going to be changing the variable. But if Python passes by reference, then we would actually be changing the value. So then we say print x, and if 100 by value, and if 200 by reference. And so we do this, and it looks like 100 by value. And so we might think that Python actually passes things by value. So far, so good. But what if I have another example? X equals 10, 20, 30. And let's say def add 1 to y. Then we say y append 1. And now I say add 1 to x. And we do a print x. And now we're getting 10, 20, 31. So it looks kind of inconsistent, yeah? It looks like sometimes Python passes things by value and sometimes Python passes things by reference. This is all to say that neither of these descriptions is accurate or the right thing to say in the Python world. If you're in Python and talking about passing by value or passing by reference, you're totally missing the boat on how arguments are passed. Arguments are passed as an object reference. When I say here x equals 100, what that really means is that the variable x is referring to the object 100. And then when I call make 200 with x, what's happening? I'm just passing that object reference along. So you might say, oh, see, variables are passed by reference. But then when I say y equals 200, remember in languages like C, when I make an assignment, when I say y equals 200, what that means is that we are putting the value 200 inside of the box that y is associated with, inside the memory piece of memory, the memory cell that y is associated with. So that's why it makes a big difference, and that's why C programmers are often asking about this. But in Python, y equals 200 does not mean that we are populating the memory cell referenced by y with the value 200. Rather, what it means is that the name y is now going to be referencing 200. So if before, basically, both x and y were referring to 100. Now x is referring to 100. It continues to refer to 100, and y now refers to 200. But then the function ends. So the local y variable goes away. The global x variable remains referring to 100. So it's not that in this case x was passed by value. No, not at all. It was still passed by reference. The thing is that when we do assignment, right, assignment by definition in Python breaks the connection to previous data. So yeah, between lines 3 and 4 there, x and y are both referring to the same data, meaning the number 100. But then in line 4 we say no, y should refer to 200. So x continues pointing to 100, y points to 200. Okay. But what's going on here then? I say x refers to the list 10, 20, 30. And then I call the function add 1. Well, what's happening then is we are not using assignment. We're not saying y equals. Rather, we're saying y.append. We are invoking a method. And when we don't use the equal sign, when we don't use the assignment operator, And we have data, and here's the key thing. When we have mutable data, we can modify the data that is being referred to both by x and by y. So between lines 3 and 4 here in the second cell, x and y are referring to the same data, the same list. And then in line 4 we say, okay, y wants to, we're going to say y.append 1. We're going to affect the list that y is referring to by adding 1 to it. But hey, it turns out that that list is also the list that x is referring to. X and y on line 4 are aliases for one another. The global x and the local y refer to exactly the same thing. So if I modify y, I'm modifying x. And so when the function returns, the y variable perhaps goes away because of the local variable, but the data was changed. And so it's not really reasonable to talk about call by value or call by reference in Python, even though many people ask about it. Rather, what you should be asking is, did I pass mutable data or immutable data? And am I using assignment, or am I invoking a method that modifies the object? If you use assignment, it doesn't matter whether you're using mutable or immutable data. It just does not matter. The moment you use assignment, the reference, the variable is referencing something else. But if you're using mutable data, and if you invoke a method that modifies that mutable data, and by the way, when I say method, it could also be square brackets, right? By the same token, I could have said y square brackets 2 equals something. That's also effectively a method. Then I will affect the data, and it will be reflected both outside the function and inside the function. This, by the way, is a really important point to think about when you're invoking a function. Remember, if you pass immutable data, if you pass a function a list or a dictionary or a set, or even an instance of one of the objects that you've created, it is possible that the function will modify that data. And so you really better make sure that you know what you're calling, and you better make sure if you're writing a function like this that you document it well so people will know what's going to happen to their data when it's passed along to you.